At a high level, what does your company do?
We're actually a nonprofit organization that was created to make learning more high quality and more effective, easier to produce high quality learning with AI. Lazuli is a product that we've made, context engineering for learning design. Guides you through the process of how do you plan for that? How do you understand your learners? How do you understand the context? What is the learning research that goes into that?
A new tool might come out that will cause you to need to pivot in your business.
2 years old, and we've redesigned our underlying architecture 4 times. This last big pivot has been probably our most fundamental. Now with agent skills, that's actually a lot easier to do. The bottleneck is no longer the developer's time. Well, developer's time is a lot faster now. We can develop more, we can build more, much more quickly.
Will robots replace teachers?
One of the things that teachers do that robots never will is to build a connection.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have David Porcaro. He's the CEO of Learning Design Alliance. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So at a high level, what does your company do?
Well, we're actually a nonprofit organization that was created to make learning more high quality and more effective, to make it easier to produce high quality learning with AI, and to be able to iterate and continue to improve it over time.
Okay, interesting. And what is Lazuli?
Lazuli is a product that we've made. It's probably the best way of describing it is context engineering for learning design. So if you're building training, if you're doing an e-textbook, if you're doing some sort of educational game, anything that you're designing, a workshop, anything like that, it guides you through the process of how do you plan for that? How do you understand your learners? How do you understand the context? What is the learning research that goes into that? And then it helps you to edit and build the learning environments, and then export them into a learning management system, into a website, into an LLM, wherever you might have that learning happening, and then instruments the data so that we can continue to collect evidence of learning as students are interacting with it. So it started out as a context engineering platform, and as some of that stuff in the last couple of months has become much more available through agent skills, through Claude Code, some of these harnesses, we've started to focus much more on the evidence collection, the instrumentation, being able to build anywhere. So if you're building in Claude Desktop, Claude Code, you can use the MCP and some of the skills that we're building, and then be able to collect that evidence and track that through the Lazuli platform.
Okay. So who is your end customer?
Yeah, so probably we started with professional learning designers. That was kind of the first place to start. And as we've made the tools easier and easier to use, we're starting to find the people who do the best with it are usually some sort of subject matter expert. That could be an instructor in higher education. It could be a trainer. It could be someone who's just trying to teach someone something else. They're the ones who are finding that this is really useful, bringing the learning science and everything that we know about learning into their expertise, and allowing them to quickly and easily build high quality learning environments, and then iterate and collect evidence and see how they can improve it.
And how did you initially get into this?
So my background is in learning design. I've been doing this for a very long time. So started out with PhD in learning design and technology, learning what is the science of learning, how do we build technologies around that, how do we design for learning environments. The field of learning sciences and the field of AI actually have been built by one foot in one and one foot in the other by some of the same people over time. As people are trying to understand how we learn, they said, well, how can we model that with computers? And then people are saying, well, how do we model with computers how people learn? We need to understand how people learn. And so back and forth, those two have been developing since like the 60s. So there's a lot of overlap between AI and between the learning sciences. So I've been involved in that since the like early 2000s, helping to build chatbots 10, 15 years ago, helping to build recommender systems, helping to build like essay graders, things like that. Been working on this for quite some time. And throughout this, I've been trying to help people to apply best practices in the learning sciences and in design, human-centered design, some of these things where you have to really understand what is your context, who are your learners before you can even start building. And the moment came about 2 years ago. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, if you look back at the digitization of the early 2000s, what did that, or late 90s, early 2000s, what did that enable? It enabled us to take things that were analog, people's handwritten notes, ledgers of numbers, that sort of the sound, video. We were able to digitize those and turn those into numbers. And once you turn those into numbers, there's all sorts of things you can do with them. And so that was kind of the initial digitization revolution. Well, now what we've come to allow is we have ideas. Ideas can be semantically represented in numbers. And so AI is enabling us, generative AI, transformers, large language models have enabled us to take really complex ideas and put those into numbers that we can process extremely quickly and do all sorts of things with, modify them and transform them and whatnot. And so that's what learning is ideas. That's what the whole field of education and learning is around ideas. So now that we've started to digitize ideas, there's all sorts of things we could do. So about 2 years ago, I said, well, okay, what if we take what we know about learning and the processes of learning and what we're learning about AI and put those together into some sort of a procedure with what are the inputs, what are the outputs, what is the data that we need, how do we evaluate it? So we've been working on this for the past 2 years or so, and starting to build the entire system. And throughout the way, we've been seeing, how are people designing? How are they editing? What are the things that are preventing them from adopting AI? And the tools just keep getting better. So in fact, I'll tell you a story. About 2 years ago, we said, oh, it'd be really great if we had this kind of editor that would allow you to create HTML, and the AI agents maybe are trained, or at this time, agents were still pretty new. So let's just say like the AI models were trained on the ability to break down an HTML like web page into its component parts, and I could give it models of something that was really good. And we said, yeah, let's dig into that, but let's wait. And we waited a little bit. We tried some other things. And now we have like Google Design, or Cloud Design. Sorry, Cloud Design came out a week and a half ago, and that's exactly what it does. And so there's things that we were like, oh, we should wait for that, or we're not quite ready to dig into it, and someone else is doing it. So we said, great, let's plug into that. We don't need to reinvent that, but let's plug that into our system. So that's kind of the way we've been approaching things this whole time is how do we take what we know from our field, from the domain, from the expertise we have, and the skills just keep improving the quality of these agents to do long-lasting and complex tasks, our ability to evaluate them, our ability to edit them manually. Those things just keep improving, and it makes me really excited every day about what we're going to be building 6 months from now.
Yeah. With that, how we're talking about, we have these new tools like Claude Design that come out, and then they enable you to do so many new things. Do you have any thoughts that maybe a new tool might come out that will cause you to need to pivot in your business?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've already, I tell people we're 2 years old and we've redesigned our underlying architecture 4 times. So, every 6 months we're kind of redesigning. This last big pivot has been probably our most fundamental, because what we were building was a context engineering system, a number of skills, a number of procedures, and how do we put this together? And now with agent skills, that's actually a lot easier to do. I was telling some people from work the other day, if I had the ability to build an agent skill 2 years ago, I probably would have just made that skill over a couple of weekends and not built the company because that's what I was trying to do. 2+ years ago, I said, if I could get something that follows a number of steps and has a couple of connections with some APIs and databases, brings in the right data and outputs it in this format, then I'm done. but we had to build a whole system around that. We had to build the databases for the data to sit in. We had to build the UI. We had to think through the process. Now you can build that super quick, like in a couple of days. So it really does get me questioning, like, what is the future of product building? What are people going to build, and how do you build a company around these sorts of things when you can do it so quick? I don't know what's coming next. So I don't know what the next big pivot is, but we said basically editors, the ability to edit text, content, rich media, HTML is only going to get better and better and better. I don't know if you've seen Figma stock in the lately, but it's dropped 90% in the last year. So a lot of companies that were designed for just editing are really struggling right now. And so we as a team have often said, we don't want to be that. We don't want to just build editors because there's no future for that. These tools are getting better, the models are getting better, the editors that the big foundational players are making are getting better. What is our niche? And so we said, well, some of it is our expertise, our domain expertise. And we said, well, we kind of captured that in a bunch of skills, and we can continue to refine those skills. So, and skills are kind of commoditized. It's really hard to monetize a skill. So what is the product that we want to build? And we said, at the end of the day, we are able to add a layer of evidence, instrumentation, connecting what a student is doing in those experiences with evidence of learning in a way that I don't think Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT is ever going to like try and get that market. So that's where we're going at, and we'll ride this horse until it bucks us off. So I have no idea what the next 6 months are going to hold, or even the next year. It's really hard to predict.
Yeah. When you say that you help to find this evidence of learning, what exactly is the evidence of learning?
Yeah. So one of the things that we are building off of is standards that already exist. So there's a set of standards around what's called the total learning architecture. This came from the ADL, the Advanced Distributed Learning Group. I think a lot of the money for that came from the Department of Defense and some other like NATO and some other people over the last like 10, 20 years. And that has contributed to a lot of the standards that we have in learning. The SCORM standard, for those of you who know, like learning design, that kind of came out of that group. And then the XAPI standard. And so this XAPI standard is experience API. And it's how do we collect evidence of someone doing something? And how do we roll that evidence up into some machine readable, but also kind of human readable formats? And then there's some other things that we do, like how do we align the competencies and skills that people might be aligning against, or the metadata about the learning activity itself, some other properties of the learning systems. And then they've been working with IEEE to make those standards available. So we said, let's build on those standards. Let's not try and recreate something new. Let's build on those standards. Can we get the AI to learn how to produce these XAPI statements? So API statements, simple XML. It basically just says a user, a student, and then a verb. And the verb is usually like demonstrated or completed or did some activity, and then some object. And so we've just made it so that when the AI is building the activity, it says, okay, if these are the competencies that I'm trying to cover, and this is the other data I know about the learners, about the context, about learning science research, and we feed that into the actual like prompt for the agent. We say build instrumentation, event instrumentation that then can go to our API, and then we put that into a learner record store, and then we send that through basically a Bayesian network algorithm that collects evidence over time that you mastered something. So if you answered a question, if you did a role play, if you engaged in some simulation, we'll say, hey, that contributes 10% towards our understanding of you doing this thing. And so we're moving that all into an SDK that you could deploy like with a skill directly in Cloud Code if you wanted to. So when Cloud Code is building your HTML, it inserts these kind of triggers for these events, sends them to our learner record store, or you can configure it to your learner record store, and then that data collects over time. And then we just are working on the ability to make really great dashboards and kind of AI generated, so you can say, hey, tell me what data I have available. I'm trying to answer this question, and then it will generate the kinds of dashboards that will answer those questions.
Okay. What kind of courses do you typically create with this?
Um, Everything. I mean, we're working with Western Governors University. It's a online university right now. They're kind of our big anchor customer to get this off the ground. We've been doing some business courses with them. I really like courses that require a lot of practice. So in the case of our pilots, we've been doing this with some business courses, business communication courses. So people are using the AI to practice talking with other students, to practice writing, to practice presenting, different things that you would do in a business course, and then getting feedback. And then that feedback's collecting evidence against mastery of these skills. We've also looked at, I mean, this works for, people say, oh, does it just work for higher education? We've done pilots in early grade learning and done offline stuff. So the AI basically will build you all the materials. You can print it off. Students are working by hand. You take a picture of it or you film it, and then that gets sent back to that evidence store. And so it doesn't have to be online learning. It could be anywhere people are learning. And so we're just trying to figure out more and more places. We're working on some statistics content. We've been working on computer science type content. We've been working on just a number of different experiences. And then internally as a team, as we're testing this, the developers are often making content like on French furniture and building and things like that. So it's basically anything.
Interesting. What is the experience like to create one of these courses?
Well, up until a couple months ago, it was, you come into Lazuli, you set up a course, you're kind of building it there. And then once we kind of created this MCP and moved some of our skills over to Claude, you're in Claude and you're connecting other things like Canva, or maybe you're connecting your Monday.com board, or, whatever it is. You've got different data sources and they're all coming together in Claude. And so as you're building, it's asking you questions. It's interviewing you as a designer would. Well, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? How do you know when a student has mastered that thing? What does good look like? Okay, who are your learners? What is their prior knowledge? So it's asking you questions. How deep do you want me to go? Do you want me to go really deep because I can ask you a lot of questions? Or do you want me to just make some assumptions? Or do you want me to go look up stuff? And so it will go and say, hey, I found some stuff in this database. Would you like me to use this? Or, so there's some planning steps that happen. Things are being built, documents are being built, you can review them. In Lazuli, they'll go through our MCP, be put back into the Lazuli tool, and then you can share them with other people. So you can say, hey, share this with my team, get comments, suggestions, that sort of thing. And then when we all kind of agree that this is the right place, or right understanding of learning, or our learners, or our context, then we move to the next step. Then it's, okay, I've got a lesson plan. It's kind of structured my whole course out. I know what my goals are, all my skills for the course. Now I'm building directly in a page. And so we kind of built off of a Notion style editor. You can do headers and bullet points and stuff like that. But now we're starting to find you can do more and more with just direct HTML. So now we're saying, well, what if I just say, here's an HTML page? Just like with AI Studio or any of these other tools, just make me a really great AI enabled web page. And so it will do that, but it's instrumented the learning. And when it's building, it's saying, okay, well, what does the research say about how we should do that? What is the best way of asking that question? So that's kind of what the experience is like. And then the idea is that you say, well, I need to deliver this somewhere. I need this in a learning management system or something like that. So we have some converters that will convert it over into some common formats like for OpenEdX or for Common Cartridge that's used by a lot of other learning management systems. And then you put that in your learning management system and students start using it, and then you pull up your dashboard and there you've got like really great evidence about how students are learning. So, it's kind of happening in Claude. While you're in Claude, you could say, hey, can you make me Canva a really great infographic for this page? And so your MCP for Canva is kind of pulling that in and putting it into your course. My dream state is that people are doing this in kind of let's just say a 2-day workshop. You bring in all the subject matter experts, you bring in the designers, you bring in everyone maybe some students, and you sit down and you say, let's walk through our goals. Let's walk through all these steps together. And within a couple of hours, you're walking through each of these steps together. And by the end of the day, you have a prototype that you can go send out to users and have them testing it and using it. Come back the next day, review what you've learned on the dashboard, talk about what you want to iterate, make another version, and then, get it ready to launch for a larger pilot. So in 2 days, you can go from an idea to an iterated, researched sort of experience. That's really what I want people to be doing more and more of. What I don't want, and I've heard this from so many potential customers, is people have this idea that designing with AI or building with AI is pushing a big red button. You push the big red button, it does everything for you. At the end comes this beautiful, perfectly polished thing. That never happens. It's never happened for me. But it's all about steps. It's about iteration. It's about human in the loop. It's about planning. It's about spending most of your time up front thinking about what is the context? What are your goals? Like, what do you really want to do with learning? Where do you really want people to be? And it kind of, I would say it's a kind of a bad thing in the whole AI building space that we spend a lot of time saying, yeah, these things will build whatever you want. It will make whatever video, it will make whatever website. But we kind of forgot all the lessons that we learned over the last 20 years about asking the right questions and building the right things, because the bottleneck is no longer the developer's time. It used to be that was the big bottleneck. So we spent a lot of time up front with the design and making sure we were building the right thing so that we could use developers' time effectively. Well, developers' time is a lot faster now. We can develop more, we can build more, much more quickly. We don't spend as much time thinking about, are we building the right thing anymore? And so I'd love to get us to a point where we're spending much more time up front thinking about, are we building the right thing? Do we have the right context? If we plan this correctly, and then quickly building things and then quickly iterating them and getting feedback from people. So there's humans in that loop all the way along. It's not an automatic button. There are still designers, there's still subject matter experts, there's still people who are like really understand the learner, the students, and then you're getting this in front of students, you're collecting feedback from them, and you're fixing it in days, weeks, months, not years like the traditional learning process, like building a textbook and revising it every 5 years or whatever. You can revise it every couple of months, and then your content is fresh. You're not dealing with like 5-year-old computer science textbooks that are completely useless. So
Yeah. What was the traditional way to create these learning materials?
I mean, it depends. It depends on where you are and what kind of resources you have. I think that was one of the things that I was trying to solve for when I was building this, is that we know what good design looks like. We know what good iteration looks like. We know there's enough people that have been studying the sciences of learning for long enough that we know generally what we should be doing. People don't have the time to do that or the resources to do it. Usually you have to build a course quite quickly, and then you make an online course, let's just say for a college that's going to be used by hundreds of thousands of students. You're going to spend a year going back and forth with a professor or two, or a board of people. You're going to kind of spend several months defining what your goals are for, like, what are all the skills you want to cover. You're going to build out the course plan. You're going to put it into some sort of wireframe document or storyboard document that's in like Sometimes it's in Excel, sometimes it's in PowerPoint. It's in these document formats that we're trying to describe what is the interaction going to do, and what images are there going to be, and what's the script for what people are going to say, and what are all the question options. And that was tedious and really time consuming. And I remember at one time I was building in a company a while ago, and our biggest bottleneck was our ability to create assessment items. So we could make the learning, but we had, because of the way this kind of adaptive system worked, we had to have a lot of assessment items that covered those topics, and to have humans handwrite 20 different variations of one kind of a learning thing just took a long time. Now that's instant. That stuff happens so quickly. But we want to make sure they're good. Like, are those questions any good? Are they actually capturing the learning that we want to? So then you build all that, you send it out to a production team. They're making videos, they're making illustrations, they're writing assessment items. That's usually outsourced. Maybe you're outsourcing the actual interactions, maybe there's simulations in there. Pretty soon that the price tag has gone really, really high. You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for a few hours of content, learning content. And so people were always saying, well, how can we make that cheaper? How can we make that cheaper? And so you're usually cutting out the analysis, you're cutting out the iterations, you're cutting out the time with subject matter experts, or you're trying to like make it very cookie cutter sort of learning experience so you can just rinse and repeat. So you have, your video scripts look all exactly the same, or your learning looks all exactly the same. And students have come and said, like, over the years, that's not very fun. I mean, how many times have you gone on a MOOC or some sort of like massive open course and you're like, yeah, this is kind of boring. It's not very engaging. We know how to make it better. It takes time and money. Now, with AI, we can do that stuff so much faster. So the bottleneck's no longer the assessment creation. It's no longer, going from an idea to a production environment. Now the real time can be spent on iterating, improving, testing, collecting data. That's where I really hope people are spending more time.
Okay, so now with these AI enabled tools, you feel like they're spending time in more human and more fun places and more useful places.
I mean, from the pilots that we're doing, yes. I would love to see this spread out to how everyone's designing learning. I used to work for a big textbook publisher that moved to kind of a digital publisher, and at the time, I remember there's a lot of people who kind of came from the textbook world. And if you think about a textbook, you build a textbook, you ship it out to a whole bunch of students. How do you know whether that textbook is working or not? You kind of have to wait until a couple semesters go by. How many books got returned? How many people complained? That's like the only feedback you got. And so moving to a world where we're like, no, we know where students dropped off. We know how far they got in things. We know which questions they didn't answer. It was still very hard for people to realize that they could get that level of data about students and what to do with that level of data about students. Some people have come along, but not everyone. And so there's still a lot of people who they don't really look at their courses once they're published. Maybe they'll come back 2 years later. They'll kind of collect all the evidence of what went wrong. They'll fix it. But we're talking about like massive amounts of data about where students are struggling, what they're saying in these AI interactions, how they're feeling about things, where they're showing persistence, where they're showing frustration, like all those things we can capture and be able to signal to people. Within a couple of weeks, you're able to say, oh, shoot, we need to revise this. And revising's super easy. You go in and you say, hey, here's this data, here's this page, here's my students. What should I do to improve it? You get 3 or 4 suggestions. You kind of manually finish them off, and then you've got a really great learning experience. So that's what I'm hoping more and more people will do, as these tools make it easier and easier to do that. What I don't want, and I hear people say this all the time, is, well, does that just mean that we don't have teachers, that we don't have instructional designers, that we don't, we can just automate all that? And I'll say, no, like, you can't automate all that. You can definitely bring down the cost of production so you can spend more time improving the quality of what you're doing, analyzing the situation, making it better. But I really don't think we'll ever get to a world where AI is teaching everyone. Like I really hope we don't.
Yeah. How do you ensure that you have a high quality course before you start interacting with the students?
Oh, that's a really great question. So one of the things that we've kind of built into our skill is a bunch of evaluators. So I'd like to think of designing a learning experience, whether it's digital or not, is not that different from designing and developing a software experience. So when you're building software, if someone said, "Hey, I got this great idea for a website. I'm going to go vibe code it and then I'm going to launch it," you'd be like, "That's pretty stupid for a lot of reasons." People do it. I don't know if other people you talk to do that, but it's stupid for a lot of reasons. One, did you check the security on the thing? Did you like unit test things? Did you end to end test it? Did you like build a scalable infrastructure? How do you even know that that thing is marketable, that people are going to want it? There's so many of these like hypotheses that you could probably ask questions of and test before you even launch. And then once you launch, you want to see, well, how are users using it? And so you plug in something like Posthog or whatever, and then you're able to look at how people are using your tool. Well, we want that to be the exact same experience for learning design. So before you even launch, you should be running tests. You should look, is it accessible? Is it aligned to your learning objectives? Does it meet the level of the students? So if all your students are third graders, is the language of instruction third graders? If all your students are from this region of the world, do your examples align with the culture of those people? Or is it just like generalized AI slop, right? Like, how do you know that this is even good? So we've created a bunch of evaluators that before you even launch can kind of go through your course. And that's why the context engineering is so important is I can't evaluate your course unless I know who you're building for, what your context is, what your goals and your objectives are, what your philosophy towards learning is. So once you go and you hit like the evaluate button, if you haven't done that planning up front, it will say, I can't actually evaluate this till I know more about your context. Kind of takes you back to the beginning of the cycle, asks you questions, helps you to build out a better understanding of what are your goals, what are your intentions, who are the people you're designing for, what are their goals, what are their intentions. And so as you're building that, we can kind of keep track of that before you launch. We can even run it with simulated students if we want to and say, okay, here's some personas that you've developed. Let's test that out with them before we launch and see how would they respond to it. I wouldn't stop there. I'd get real users, I'd get real students and kind of pilot and launch still. But you can get a lot of signal before you even launch that you're on track or you're off track.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I know we initially touched on this a little bit, but will robots replace teachers?
I really hope not. One of the things that teachers do that robots never will, and that's really important for learning, is to build a connection. And that's why we go to school. That's why we do things. There's a lot of research around like how do you gain a sense of belonging in an organization? If you feel like you belong, if you feel safe, then your capacity to learn increases tremendously. But if you're on guard, if you feel like you don't belong somewhere, there's a bunch of research about like stereotype threat, for instance, that if you feel like you're being stereotyped in a math class because you're a woman or a minority or because of some other reason, then you're not going to perform as well as if you felt comfortable and you felt like you belonged there. So, how do you help people to feel a sense of belonging? It's through relationships. When people feel a relationship with someone else in the room, whether it's another student or a teacher or another adult in the room or whatever, then you're going to be motivated to learn. And if you're motivated to learn, you're going to learn. Like that's really the secret to learning. Yeah, there's all sorts of little tips and techniques to help people get more motivated when learning is hard, because learning is always hard. It's a struggle. So how do you persist? How do you deal with failure? What happens when you think you know something and you try and perform it and it doesn't go well? Like that's where think about your own learning and the times that you've grown. What are the times when you've said, wow, that person really helped me when I failed that one activity. and I would have given up if it weren't for that person. Well, that's the role teachers and peers and humans are going to play. Robots will never do that. And you know, as much as people are finding emotional connection with chatbots and stuff like that, I really think that it's the humans that make us. It's what makes us human, and that's the part that I would love to celebrate. Now, the other thing that humans do a really good job of, I mean, why would you go to an expert to learn how to do something? Because they have experience. They've done it. They can tell you how they got to where they were, what choices they made in their life, how they kind of set up their career, what things they decided to do and take risks on, what things they didn't, and how that played out. That's the kind of stuff that just comes with life experience. And so far, the kind of quality feedback I've gotten from AI chatbots has not shown me that they know what, you know, those ins and outs, like a very generic descriptions. And I'd rather go talk to someone who's done it and lived it and experienced that. And it makes me motivated, makes me want to become something. And that's a big part of learning too, is how do I become? How do I become a mathematician or become a podcaster, or how do I become a video producer, or how do I become whatever? That comes from like conversations you have with other people. And then lastly, I don't know if I'm a third or fourth, whatever number I'm on, number 3 is that you know, what makes us human is a sense of awe. It's a sense of connection to our planet, connection to nature. It's beauty and creativity. It's the arts. It's these sorts of things that really make us human. And it's when we spend that time with other humans and feel a sense of awe for the like life that we live. That's what that's what I want the future of learning to really look like. I want people to be spending a lot of time there. Do I want people to be sitting in a classroom learning how to do a spreadsheet that an AI chatbot can do for me? Like, no, that's kind of a waste of time. But we should be spending more time really understanding what it means to be human. And that's where we should be spending our time. And that's what I hope the future of learning looks like.
Yeah. AI can sounds like AI can really be used to build some interesting courses. What are your thoughts on students using AI to possibly like answer some of the questions and stuff?
Yeah, I'm going to actually correct one thing you said, just one little piece.
Yeah,
I've always told people the AI doesn't build the course, humans build the course.
I see.
AI helps you to build the course
Yeah.
because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's another thing is we need some responsibility. Like if someone comes and says, who built this course? Who said that this was what I should be learning? Whether it's me as a student paying for higher education or whether it's me as a parent going to like a school board or to a teacher, I need to hold somebody responsible for what people are learning. And I would hate for someone to just say, well, the black box made that decision. So
Yeah,
I really do think that there's going to be certain fields where maybe the AI can do things, but we don't necessarily need to outsource that. We need a human to say, yeah, a human signed off on that. So to answer your question about students using it, um, I think there's a lot of discussion about this. I just went to a conference. I was just speaking in Kazakhstan last week, and there was someone who was presenting on some research that they had done on students' acceptance of AI in the classroom. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I believe it was something like 10-15% of students, I don't know, 2 years ago, were concerned about AI in the classroom and were refusing to use it. Now the number is closer to 25%. So just in the last year or two, it's like doubled the amount of students who are showing concern about AI in the classroom. Well, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means for all learning or if that's for certain situations. I know there's a lot of instructors who are very concerned about students using AI for cheating, for writing essays, for answering questions, that sort of thing. I heard someone say something. I wish I could remember who it was so I could give them credit, but they said if you know learning is about stretching and growing and trying things out. So if we have AI do it for us, it would be like driving a forklift to the gym just to lift weights. If that's all we needed was the weights lifted, then we could bring a forklift in there. But no, it's about us and it's about our own growth and the resistance that we have against things. So there's a lot of students who are selling their own education short by skipping that work. Like, yeah, sure, you could have a robot lift weights for you in the gym, but like to what end? Why would you do that? Now, on the flip side, the reason they do that sort of stuff is because maybe half of the stuff they're being asked to do is useless. It's preparing them for careers that won't exist or don't exist. It's disconnected from the reality that they live in. It's not useful activities. If they're being asked to do something like answer a 20 question multiple choice thing about something that they read and regurgitating that answer, AI can do that. There's absolutely no reason why I, as a human, should ever go through that activity. And so it's putting a giant spotlight. Um, I, I I've heard people say AI is like a mirror, but I think it's probably more like it's a magnifying lens, and it magnifies what's already there and makes it bigger. So in the case of our education system, we're putting a giant magnifying glass on it and saying, look at all these places where it's already broken, and we've known it's been broken for years, but those have risen really quickly to the surface and gotten really big. And so people are saying, hey, that lecture style format class where the professor comes and talks at me for 16 weeks, and then I fill out a multiple choice question midterm, and then I write an essay and turn it back in. Like, that's not good learning design. It never has been, and it's not going to be. And if the AI can do everything that the student needs to in that situation, they're going to get their grade, they're going to graduate and try and go get a job in a field that like doesn't use that class. Like, of course, they're just jumping through hoops. That's all they're doing. And so it does cause us to step back and say, what is better design? And that's where I'm hoping that we get more of these skills and the thoughtful upfront planning and the questioning, like, what really do we want people to learn? And how does that mirror what they're going to be doing in the workforce? Or how does that mirror our ability to communicate with each other about ideas that we disagree on? And how does that help us to better understand beauty and truth in the world around us, and in a world of AI slop and misinformation? Like, those things are really important, and they don't come from like the old ways of designing and building courses. So I think students should be doing more with AI in the classroom. Obviously, I mean, I'm an AI advocate in education, but I think they should be doing it thoughtfully. And I think that we can be doing more to make better experiences. So I've heard some really great early on in the AI world. Some people are saying, oh, our college banned all AI use because students weren't thinking. And then some professors are like, well, what if we get them to use AI to think more deeply? And so there's like some humanities classes where they were using the AI to wrestle with ideas and people and connecting different thoughts and thinkers in a way that students, undergraduate students especially, would have never gotten to without the help and support of AI. And the teacher said, tell me, how are you using AI? That's what we're going to talk about. What prompts did you put in there? What answers did you get back? How did you critically evaluate it? How did you know when it was right or wrong? What did you question when it gave you answers instead of just blindly putting that into your sheet and saying, yeah, it gave me this answer. But when did you question it? How did you judge that that was a good answer? Those are really great activities that we should be spending more time doing. And the AI can enable us to do that so much better, so much more quickly, so much more accessibly. I can have conversations in multiple languages with it. It's able to make connections between poets and musicians in a way that a human never could. And I could do that at 3 a.m. if I really want to. And that kind of experience is really transformational.
Yeah. Is AI making us dumber?
Um, I don't know if AI is making us dumber. I mean, it's a really good question. A lot of people have asked that. There's been some research about it. Uh, there's this idea called distributed cognition. Well, actually, I should back up and say people have been saying this since like Socrates' time, when people were saying writing makes us dumber because people aren't memorizing as much as they used to. And so there's this idea called distributed cognition that's like, can I take some of my thinking and outsource it to some other tool? And if I can, that frees me up to do more deep analysis, to look broader across the thing, to look at the whole system instead of getting caught up in some of the details. But it's the zooming in and out between details and big picture that's really important. We don't spend enough time in education, like training those skills. Um, The same could be said about calculators. The same could be said about PCs. The same could be said about Wikipedia and the internet. Like we've had this conversation over and over and over again. And it really comes down to, well, how are you using it? And so is it making us dumber at some of those things that we probably can outsource to a computer? Yeah, probably.
Mhm.
But if we're also pairing that with um, better, deeper learning, systematic thinking, uh, zooming in and out between details and the big picture, transferring ideas into new situations, those sorts of things. Like, I hope we're all doing that. I all hope we're spending way more of our time in education with critical thinking and judgment. Like, how do I know that this information is any good? How do I evaluate a claim? How do I know that evidence is good? That kind of critical thinking, I'd rather have people doing that all day than like doing division by hand, long division by hand. Like that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Why were you initially inspired to start this business?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, as I said at the beginning, I've kind of been working through AI, learning sciences for a really long time in different settings, K-12, higher ed, philanthropy, venture capital, a lot of different sorts of situations, big publishers, small organizations. And so I've seen learning from a lot of different angles. And right before I started, as I was working for a venture capital firm, I was helping to build academies for the startups we were investing in. So the founders and some of the management team, how they can be more effective at their job. And we started spending a lot of time in AI. Obviously, the VC firm was really interested in that, and a lot of people were moving in that direction. So I spent a lot of time helping to train people on how to use AI systems for their job. And one, winter break, I was like, hey, I don't really know what's going on in my own field. I don't know how people are using this in learning design. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I think the stars just aligned between the technology, our ability to process large amounts of data, the kinds of data sets that were available. There's just a lot of things that all came together at once. And I said, well, what can we do with this? And so I started trying things out. I started vibe coding before vibe coding was a thing, and it was really difficult to do back
Mm.
then. I kind of put this together and I said, I think that all these pieces are together in a way that is marketable. I think it can grow and scale. I think it's an interesting problem to solve. I think the technology is there. It was just a nice mix. And I've kind of been watching for years for that combination of things, because sometimes I found something that was like, oh, this is a really cool application of technology. Who's going to pay for it? Or, here's a really cool idea that could probably scale to a bunch of people, but I'm not interested in it. It's not something that is motivating to me over the long term. And for all those who are thinking about starting a company, I mean, I've been doing this for 2 years. They say 3 years, 20% of startups are still in business, so 80% fail after 3 years. I'm hoping to still be around another year from now. I mean, we're on track for that. But every day it's a slog. It's hard. It's really, really exhausting. And so you have to really love what you're doing. You really have to love the problem you're trying to solve. And this is a problem I really, really love and have been devoting my career to. And so it enables me to go through the hard times and the boring times and the whatever else times and the roller coaster of starting an organization. So that's what motivated me to get going. And then I tested out pretty small. I said, well, maybe I can find a couple people that are interested. And at the time when you're starting an organization, you're just fishing everywhere and you're hoping something will bite, and then you start focusing and you're like, oh, look over here, this is the area where I'm getting a lot of traction, a lot of people are showing interest. How do I get that product market fit? And so, that all has kind of come together and evolved over time. But the thing that really got me motivated to do this was just I felt like the technology, the problem to be solved, and the market need were all aligned, and it just seemed like a fun problem to jump into.
Yeah. How did you get your initial customers?
I mean, because I've been in this industry for a while, I know a lot of people, and just early on, I started talking to a lot of people and saying, would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in partnering? I had quite a few friends of mine who tried out some pilots early on, were some early customers. And then someone I had been talking to that was a potential funder, the conversations weren't going anywhere. And I had a choice between creating this as a for-profit or a nonprofit. And I should mention this up front because I think this is really important. I said, for me, I'm not going to make it a for-profit for a couple of reasons, but probably the most important for me is that I've seen the way that venture capital works. You have to get it's a math game. You have to get so much returns, 3 times IRR or whatever the number is over 10 years. And if 80% of the companies are going to fail, 20% have to have 200% growth year over year, whatever the numbers are. I'm sure there's more specific numbers. But basically 200% growth year over year means that you're building a product for growth and scale, not necessarily to solve the problem that you were thinking to solve. And in a field like education, it's really hard to solve education problems and not be swallowed up by that idea of growth at all costs. There's some really great books about that. One, a person named Justin Reich wrote called Failure to Disrupt that I recommend to everyone. It's a really great book on ed tech. But that idea that if I'm going to be growing at that speed, my product's going to be turning into something that I don't want it to become. There's a whole bunch of research now about how that model is driving our internet and our software and all our SaaS companies to be really crappy experiences, that like we don't enjoy going into these tools because they're extracting every dollar out of us, all of our attention, and it just doesn't feel good. And so I said, I don't want to go down that path. It's like going to build, it's good for some people, it's good for some products, but it's not what I want for this. And I think that being a nonprofit allows me to partner with more people, to partner with other nonprofits, with governments, with schools, with organizations large and small, with researchers, and that we need to do this together. We can open source more of this material, which is coming soon. All these sorts of things that allow us to get this out into a larger reach. And so by building that, up front, it was really important to me that I get that funding to enable me to be a nonprofit. If I were a for-profit, I could have gone and raised some capital. I could have built up a team. I could have moved probably a little quicker than I did. I had to bootstrap it all. As a nonprofit, I can't give equity to anyone. There's, so the funding mechanisms are different. And I was actually headed towards getting a lot of government federal funding for this when all that federal funding just kind of disappeared. And so we had to figure out, where is this money coming from? And we had to move at the speed of contracts. So I went to some funders, talking with the funders, and the conversations were good, but it wasn't like I walked away with a check. I walked away with some people saying, oh, this is a really cool idea. Didn't hear anything. A couple months later, I get a phone call from someone else who said, hey, I talked to that funder. We're interested in what you're doing. Let's talk about whether we can fund it. So that was one thing that was really important to me early on, is that these conversations that felt like they were failures actually weren't. There were other conversations happening after I left that turned into success. So we found a great partner in the WG Labs and Jason Levin, and they've been just a fabulous partner to work on this together. And then we found some other funding. We applied for a tools competition in ed tech that was funded by a number of different philanthropies and different organizations. We've worked with a bunch of smaller organizations. We've got a couple other things that are brewing on the horizon. So that's kind of where the funding came from. And now we're like, we need a balance. We wanted to build an organization that wasn't just going to NSF or to philanthropies, big and small, and asking for money over and over every year. I wanted it to be a sustainable business built on the ideas of a software as a service, so that we could continue to keep our lights on and then use any of this grants and other donations to do the research and development and move us beyond our kind of where we're at. Well, that has worked really well for me because things change really quickly. I've watched a lot of organizations that have received venture capital that have just disappeared because of something Claude rolled out. They were a really big, beautiful company for like 5 years, and they're not quite to their exit, and things just kind of like are fizzling out. And so it's caused us to ask questions about what does the ecosystem of innovation look like in the future? What happens when you get a team of 10 people? Which is like we're a pretty small organization. We're remote. We're all remote. People all over the world are kind of working for us. Instead of being located in somewhere like San Francisco, we can be here in Denver. We can, and people are working in different states and different places, and how do you fund that in a way that doesn't require the kinds of growth that you have to have for venture capital, or the kinds of upfront investment in office space and really expensive talent in really expensive cities? What does it look like if you have a 10, 20, 30 person organization who's like really hitting a high bar and maybe niching into an area that someone wasn't going to invest in before because it just wasn't worth the return? But now all of a sudden you can solve a problem for that niche in a way that makes sense to support 30-person organizations. So that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at, is what does the economics of this innovation look like too? Because I think it's going to look different.
Yeah. What does your team look like now?
I think that's the other important part, is on the flip side, I've heard people say, oh, we're going to have all these unicorns with one person or 3 people. And I really discourage that, especially as a founder. Like, I need 10, 20, 30 people. I don't need 300,000, but I definitely need some people who understand the architecture and the security and the infrastructure. I need people who really understand the back end and the data. I need people who really understand the front end and what's happening when Claude is building HTML and JavaScript, and how to improve that and make it more efficient. I need designers who can really help me to think through the actual, what are we building and why, and what are the principles that make that consistent. I need marketing. I need people who can go have conversations on my behalf, and sales. I need administrative help. I need professional legal, HR, all these sorts of things. Sure, Cloud can help me so that I don't have a really large team, but I really do need specialists in all those areas. So I kind of have like, we've split it up between full-time employees and part-time contractors. We have some people who are working 5 hours a week. We have some people who are working 40 hours a week. So it's kind of a mix. Right now we have about 15 people on payroll, but we're able to move pretty quickly with that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like a fractional CTO?
Oh yeah, I would love to have. Fractional anything is really, really helpful. I don't know. I tried a fractional CTO early on. It was hard for that person to devote attention to this project when they were split across multiple projects. And so, the model that I found is our team is pretty much like bottoms up. We all contribute ideas. We all try and distribute our roadmap equally across the team. There's some things that we're trying to improve in our process to make it feel like a really agile, small team. So I kind of like to think of everyone that's on the team as chief whatever officer that they do.
Yeah.
But I think a fractional CTO is great for some organizations. For us, we kind of had to have the person who plays that role is there 35 hours a week. So
Okay. Cool. That makes sense. So I know you mentioned how you got your initial customers. Has anything changed over these last few years about how you get your customers today?
we're kind of at a big pivot point. I think we've kind of finalized the product that we wanted to build. It's taken us a while, a couple iterations. The next couple months are where we're going to see this either takes off or it doesn't, right? and that's, I think, the real point with any startup, is you get to a point where it's like, we've got a great primary customer that our engagement with them is growing. More parts of their organization are picking this up and going. Now they're starting to call on other people and asking those people to come talk to us. We're getting more people trying things out. We're starting to get more partners, some more big name partners. So that's the next big part, is me moving away from being a builder CEO to being the chief sales guy, right? So I
Yeah.
need to now take this and say, okay, we've got a really cool product, but not very many people know about it, or they don't know how to use it. And how do we train people how to use this? That's been the biggest barrier to adoption. I'll be completely honest, is not the tool. Yeah, we've had some hiccups along the way, building pains, like growing pains, and we've ironed out bugs and things have gotten better. But the largest issue is you go into an organization, you say, I've got this really cool tool that automates a lot of your process. It changes the way that you're designing. It changes the makeup of your teams. It changes what people are doing. And the leadership of the organizations are like, I mean, they're really excited about it, but once you get it in the hands of the people using it, they're like, this thing's going to take my job. And then they get really hesitant and they're kind of scared. And so there's a certain amount of human change management that needs to go with that. And so that's our next big push is how do we build the services around that? How do we help people to feel comfortable? How do we make them feel like they can come in really easily and see the value that they want? And where do they go when they have questions? And how can they share their ideas with each other? How do we turn people into people who design with AI first instead of like, oh, I use ChatGPT to answer questions for me. It's like, no, 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 we're talking agents. This is a totally different kind of environment. How do we move people to that? I think the technology is moving faster than people's absorptive capacity to take on that change. So that's where we see our biggest gap is how do we bring the people along? The tool can do really cool things, but how do we bring people along to use that effectively? And that's where we're going to be spending the rest of our time. So some of it is, you know, just traditional sales and marketing tactics. I believe in order to have a nonprofit that grows the way we want and the size of our team, we really have to have a product-led growth kind of strategy where we don't have large sales teams. We felt as a nonprofit that we could also actually, some of our design decisions, our pricing decisions, some of our marketing decisions could be really driven by our ethics and the mission and what we were trying to do, and not by this like extractive, how do we just get the next dollar out of you? And we felt like there were things that we could do. Like I hate personally when I'm looking for IT products, if anything says, and I'm like, oh, I want to try this thing. And in order to do a demo, I have to fill out a form and talk to someone for 30 minutes. I'm not going to use that product. I'm going to go find another product. And so we don't want that kind of barrier to people's adoption that means that we're gating features that don't cost us anything, but we know are going to extract value from us. Our designers were so happy that we could build things that didn't have dark UX patterns in them because we were like, let's be transparent about our pricing. You pay what we pay plus a little bit extra to keep our lights on. That's it. That's our pricing model. And so far that's been working for us. I mean, we got to continue to refine it but that's what we're kind of moving on to. So how do we find the next customer? Some of it's people are really excited about what they're seeing. We're having lots of conversations with people. That's going really well. The next part of the funnel is getting it into the hands of the actual designers and builders and having them feel really good about it. So we've got a couple of things that we're going to be launching soon. Just big kind of guerrilla type marketing stuff, like putting our skills out there and making them open source and saying, hey, everyone, use this, give us feedback, tell us how it's working for you. Don't even worry about our product. Like just use the skill, see how it's working and things like that.
What's your biggest objection when you try to sell the product?
I mean, it really comes, well, there's everyone has different reasons. I was going to say there's one or two things, but now I think about it, it's like, how does it fit into our system? Can it plug into our processes? And half the time I'm like, well, we're trying to change your system. Like we're trying to change your processes and making them more efficient. So I don't want to like just customize this to your current use case. It's like we got to work together to figure out what the future looks like. So that one becomes a barrier usually. A lot of people are really concerned about where's the data going? How is it being processed, especially if it's students' data? How do we know it's not biased? How do we know it's sustainable? How do we know that it's reliable? All those sorts of things. So we're working on that. I think it was really important for us to work on our SOC 2 compliance and make sure that people understood how we were handling the data, how we were handling our own processes for incident response and all those other things that when you're a startup founder with a small team, you're like, oh, how do I think through these things? And then just that change management thing. Senior leadership loves it. People on the ground are like, hey, this is taking my job. I'm really scared. And so you just have to make it feel like we're not taking your job. We're helping you to be more effective. And let's see if this tool can help you. there's a lot of negative people tried out AI 2 years ago and it didn't do what they wanted to. And so now they're kind of turned off by the whole AI revolution and they don't realize how much things have changed or, I don't know, there's some of that still. Um, People see these reports that say, hey, there's no ROI on AI systems because big industries and enterprises put in a lot of money 2 years ago into building RAG systems and whatever, and we've moved way past that. And so there's a lot of people who are feeling stung a little bit. And so we're just trying to make it say, look, play with this. See if it works. If it works for you, then grow. We're not going to ask you to come and completely replace your whole system tomorrow. Like, yeah, this plugs in really well, and trying it out is the cost of trial and verifying whether it's working for you is really low. So just try it out. So that's what we're really focusing our messaging, our product, all the things that we're doing into just, can you try it out? I mean, that was a big pivot probably around December. We had tried to build a big system. This was a big systems problem. So we were trying to build the whole system. And then we started to say, what are pieces we can bite off? This one action that we know teachers really struggle with, or this one thing that we know learning designers really struggle with. And let's make an end-to-end, it works really well. And then let's start telling people about that. So the last couple of months, we've been focusing more on those sorts of things.
Yeah. Where do you see your company going in the next 6 to 12 months?
Oh, I wish that I knew. I mean, the optimist in me says, this is going to take off and it's going to take off really quickly. And we're going to be in that massive growth phase. Where I'm looking for another job, one of those two things is going to happen. I really would like to see that this is going to get some traction and start to grow, and the number of users just kind of snowballs as people see the value in these things. I talk to so many people that their jaws just drop and they say, why isn't everyone using this? And some of it is well, let's talk about the processes you have in place in your organization. On the flip side, 6 months from now, Google or Claude, Anthropic, or OpenAI may come out with a product that completely makes us irrelevant. I have no idea. I really don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
Up until 2 years ago, I could tell you pretty much where the markets were heading, where products were heading, where technology was heading, and bets are all off now.
Yeah, things are moving so quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Can AI grade fairly?
So a couple of years ago, I guess it was last year, there was a big education research conference here in Denver, AERA. The American Education Research Association. I went to every session I could about AI. Now, granted, the way that education publishing kind of happens, you have to submit something a year in advance, and usually the research that you did was maybe even up to a year before that. So people are reporting on things that were 2 years old, and this was last year. So we're talking about ChatGPT 3.0 and stuff like that is what they're looking at. Every single thing that I went to, someone was like, can AI assess as well as a human on this task or in this situation or this situation? And the answer was always, in every single one of the sessions I went to, yes. So I don't feel like AI can grade worse than a human. But how good is that bar? What can we do to improve it? Do humans grade fairly? Do humans show bias? Yeah, there's all sorts of research, including some interesting stuff that Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, has said about, if judges have your case before or after lunch determines how lenient they are going to be. So little factors like that affect us as humans. Well, we can definitely see if the bar is higher than humans' fail abilities. We did some research. We grabbed a whole bunch of open data sets and looked at whether our inference engine, kind of our grading engine, was as good as humans on these tasks. So basically, we just took these hand graded assessments from Hugging Face. We took out the human evaluation. We passed the actual assignment the student did, the assignment instructions. We gave it a grade, and then we compared that with the human grade. And in the cases that we looked at, the AI was within the range of humans. But the AI tended to give C's when humans tended to give B's and A's. So it does cause us to say, well, I guess great inflation is real. We need to look at this elsewhere. But how do we calibrate it? How do we say, well, okay, for this setting or for this school, maybe we need to say the AI graded C is a human graded A. I've also approached this saying, we don't know enough to be able to give the keys to the car yet. Like the AI shouldn't be driving us around yet because we still need to test it. So early days of self-driving cars, there was always a human in the driver's seat. Their hands were ready to take the wheel whenever they wanted. Our system's kind of similar in that we're saying we're giving you feedback, we're measuring things, we're looking at learning, but we're not quite ready to say, you got an A in this class. A human still needs to be the one that gives that data. Now, there's some interesting legislation, like here in Colorado, AI rules about if decisions are made, then using AI, then the organizations that make those decisions have to be transparent if people ask about what was the data, what were the algorithms, how was that decision made, and there's all sorts of like back and forth about how that law will be enacted. But it does cause us to ask some really important questions about, do we want AI to grade, or do we want to have a human be the one who evaluates what an AI synthesizes and points out? So I really like having it do things like take a video transcript that a student uploaded and find all the timestamps where you think this thing happened and your justification for why, send that to a human, have the human review it and give the final grade. Like that definitely speeds up the process, and the human can review the whole video if they want. But I would much rather want the human to help in those sorts of situations. We also don't know where it breaks down. What about this task? Is this task not very good for the AI to do? What about this task with these learners? Or does it bias against your accent if you're doing an audio graded assignment? We don't know. There's just a lot of things that we're still trying to research. And so what I really hope is not only does the system help you to build AI quickly, but it allows you to research that AI quickly. So we can build the settings so researchers can come in and say, okay, I built this. Now let's test it with learners. Let's make sure this is working before we bring it to production. So does AI grade fairly? No, humans don't either. There's things we can do to improve both. But I'm not quite ready to give it the keys to the car yet.
Yeah. What do students like versus not like about using these courses?
What we're hearing is that they definitely like that there's very realistic practice and they get immediate feedback. So some of the things that we're doing is AI chats with someone in a business situation, and then it kind of gives you feedback on how well you handled that situation. Students are saying, I can practice that 3, 4, 5, 7 times and get really good feedback on that in a way that I couldn't in my normal course. I'm usually watching a video of someone else doing something. I might record myself once, submit it to an instructor. I've only done it once. I've only had a chance to do practice once. Could you imagine if you learned to ski by watching someone drive down the bunny hill, and then you went down once and they said, okay, time to go do a ski jump? You'd be like, no, hold on a second. I need more reps. I need more practice.
Hmm.
So the students are definitely saying, I love getting feedback, and I get feedback all hours of the day, endless feedback. Whereas my teacher is only available at these times. I have to set up a call with them, or I have to go after class. And so the ability to get lots of feedback is what students are really enjoying, and the alignment between the kinds of tasks that they're doing with what they hope to be doing on the job. I had one student who said he was using the system to kind of play and build things. He said, I build these courses of how I would want to learn, and then I'd go to my class and I would sit through the most horrific learning experience I knew was bad. And the night and day difference between me made me really depressed to go to my regular classes. That to me was it's sad. It's extremely sad that was the case, but it also made me happy that like we're starting to expose that to more and more people, the difference between what good and not good learning can look like. And so those are the kinds of things that make me really happy. Students are saying there's still some that are like, it was robotic, it was AI, it was whatever. And so we're trying not to overdo the AI. There's a lot of things that I've seen, a lot of learning that's just like the quality, and learning has become commoditized. It's just content. I can have AI make me a course, no problem, but I want it to be engaging. I want it to be something I can't just get off the web. I want it to be something that, if I'm paying for an education, I want it to be worth what I put money into it. So that's what I'm hearing from students is they're saying, I want something that I can't just get from ChatGPT, or I can't just get from some like AI slop on the internet.
What happens to traditional textbooks in this world of AI?
Having worked for a former textbook publisher, I mean, I don't know who's going to be listening to this, but if any of them, there's no need. Like, yeah, I don't know. Pivot quickly. I think the big textbook publishers' days are numbered. Like, there really is no need for this anymore. Um, Now they'll say, yeah, but we have like experts writing the content, and we have like huge teams of development editors, and we really high quality production. And yes, all those things, but the AI is catching up really, really quickly, and it's no time before a subject matter expert with tools like these, Lazuli or something else, could make as high quality a learning experience as something a textbook publisher's made. One Saturday I spent and I built a statistics course, and I had it do worked examples and questions and generating things on the fly, and created a really high quality math engagement experience that would have taken a lot more time and energy to build, and quite frankly replaced some of the products that people are using like large scale right now. So that leads you to, well, how does someone trust this? That's where the value is going to lie, is how does someone trust this content? Because we're going to be flooded with content. How do I trust this content? That's where it comes in relationships and brand and some of these things where people say, I'm going to buy it from this company because I trust their brand. And that's what's going to be valuable, I think, in the future, rather than just because it's a textbook. Because I think you can make a textbook in 15 minutes with Claude Code today.
Awesome. And I'll wrap with this question. What do you believe about AI in education that most people don't see yet?
I mean, one of the things that I hear whenever I read things is some of the questions you've already asked. Like, is it causing us not to think? Is it causing us to, uh, um, is it causing us to, is it biased in its thinking? Are we going to lose that human touch? I think we kind of talked about all those things. Um, I imagine that we're not that far off. Well, I didn't kind of share this vision. I imagine we're not far off from a world where students are going into somewhere like ChatGPT and saying, I have questions, and then having plugins from varying subject matter experts. And these things could be really niche. Could be something that's like just an architecture designed skill package, a plugin or something, plus maybe some MCP tools, that now I bring that into my conversation, and ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever tool I'm using now all of a sudden deeply understands that content, has really great simulators for me to use, really great tools for me to try and learn, and that it's collecting knowledge as we go. I think we're not that far off from that world, which means we don't need learning management systems. We don't need textbooks. We don't need like a lot of the systems that we've set up in education, even our like 4-year college degrees here in America with with like seat time, hours spent doing things, like all of these assumptions all of a sudden disappear when I can engage in an activity, collect all sorts of evidence of learning, store that into a backpack of some sort, and share it with an employer. What's the role of all that traditional sit and get kind of learning? And so that's the big piece that I think is coming very, very quickly at universities, at training colleges, at schools K-12 is what is the value of education? What do we as a society think the value of education is? And some people will say, like, yeah, these tools are really good at skill building, but what if those jobs don't exist? Or what about the role of just thoughtful time spent like contemplating and learning critical judgment and understanding empathy and those sorts of things? Like, yes, let's double down on those, but let's figure out how to make that work in a system where students are going to be learning in a totally different way in a couple of years than they are right now. So I'll just share this one thing. I remember someone saying Star Trek is really interesting because most of the things, a lot of the things, I mean, we're not beaming up to spaceships yet, but a lot of the things that were predicted back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and whatnot, we're starting to build. We have cell phones, we have holograms, I mean, there's all sorts of things that we've made real. But when you look at the world back then, one of the things in early Star Trek shows was the classrooms were always students sitting in rows and a teacher up front. And there was no innovation in the way that we were thinking about learning. Someone showed me a new Star Trek movie. I didn't watch it, a clip where Spock was learning. And it was in an AI agent sort of situation where they were asking questions, being asked questions, manipulating things in real space, and being able to like jump between history and physics and music and making connections across the disciplines. That's the future of learning. And that has to be enabled by AI. Like there's no other way around it. And so if we can make that world a reality, that would be pretty darn cool. I would definitely be excited about that. But we definitely need to research in a way that is equitable and fair, and that we're not missing major blind spots, or we're over indexing on things that might lead us in the wrong direction as a society. Like all those things, yes, we need to definitely take time. But that's where I think maybe something that people aren't always thinking about in AI and education is how does it make connections that we as humans can't do on our own. So,
Awesome. Well, this was a great conversation. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad I could be here.